esta conferencia. Me presento, yo soy Guillermo Huerta, soy el director de la licenciatura en Diseño Textil y Moda aquí en Centro. Para nosotros es un gran honor y un privilegio tener la presencia de David LaChapelle hoy aquí en Centro. La plática va a ser en inglés, ahorita vamos a cambiar ya a inglés, pero quería presentar primero en español. So we're very, very pleased to have David LaChapelle here in Mexico. And I want to introduce you guys to someone very special to David too, and also for Centro, is Colleen Hayes. And she has been a producer for over 25 years of David LaChapelle in video and in photography. So if you can come and say some words, it'll be really good.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having us this evening. We are so excited to be here. I speak for myself and David and our whole team. And especially excited to be at Centro. So thank you so much. It's an honor. I've been working with David for a very long time. So it's an honor to introduce my friend, David LaChapelle, and Patricia Conde, who's a local Mexican City gallerist and representative of huge Mexican photographers. So thank you very much.
Oh gosh, I'm gonna just say some thank yous that I wrote down here. First of all, gracias to Centro University for having us here today. To Guillermo Huerta, who brought us here so nicely, and Ingrid Barajas over here with 2 and 2 Productions, and Abel and her entire crew, and Mama Barajas. Hello. They're all here, and Abel and all the workers from 2 and 2 Productions who put the show together at the Palacio de Minería. They worked so hard and worked all through the night and did such a great job and so quickly getting the show together. I want to say thank you, Colleen, for everything, working on all my shoots and producing so many great things, and Christina and Leslie, Patricia Conde for having this conversation. Thank you all for coming. It's a really nice crowd, and it's so nice to be warm welcomed here in Mexico City. It's such an incredible place. Like really, this city is so so much vibrance and intensity, and it really touches you being here. Like I came from Italy, which has kind of turned into kind of Disneyland, like Rome. So many tourists. It's just so like different than how it was in the 80s. And I come to Mexico City and there's a different feeling here. You know, you see spirituality on every street corner and so much life and vitality in the streets and color and kindness. Everyone, real genuine smiles. It's really touched my heart being here. And I knew these pictures when I called Ingrid and said, I was in Maui before the fire, and I was having really I was in a place of prayer and anxiety, kind of stress, and just so I prayed a lot, and I just said, I have to show these images, and especially Stations of the Cross in Mexico City, and I called Ingrid, I said, please make it happen, as she did. So thank you, Mexico City, Ingrid, everybody. Gracias. Muchas gracias.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Patricia Conde, and I have the honor of interviewing great David LaChapelle. Well, everybody knows David LaChapelle. He's a great artist, he's the best photographer, and he has a lot to say. And I would like to make 3 questions in order for him to tell us what his photography is.
A little closer.
Sorry, do you hear me?
A
No?
little closer. Closer. Just hold it
Oh,
closer.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Well, I just say thank you. Okay. Dear David, you've mentioned that you always had a passion for art since childhood. Can you please describe what this was like for you as a 15-year-old arriving in New York and encountering the world of Andy Warhol? How would you characterize the atmosphere, the people, and the moment? And how did this experience, and how you think it shaped your journey as a young aspiring artist navigating the vibrant scene of Manhattan at a time?
And it was strange because I was in school and I was always drawing, and I wasn't listening to the teachers. I was, unless it was interesting, but I didn't find math and science so interesting. I was writing all the time, drawing pictures, and I never sat and watched TV. If we did watch TV, I was always drawing when that was that time, And I remember sitting in class as really young, and they're putting multiplication on the chalkboard, and I thought, oh, I'm never gonna need this because I'm gonna be an artist. So, I was very kind of secure in that way, but very insecure in other ways because I was getting bullied at school. So by the time I was 15, like these guys were beating me up. I was getting like a lot of hatred at school for being different and dressing different and just being different. So I dropped out of school at 15 and came to New York and worked in nightclubs for 2 years. I was living very close to New York, and I love my parents very much, but they weren't the problem. It was school. I really had a problem with this school, or they had a problem with me, I should say. So I came to New York and started working in nightclubs, but I still kept drawing and painting all the time. I was always drawing and painting and sneaking into the Art Students League on 57th Street, where all the great painters went. Even George O'Keeffe went there at a time when she stayed in New York. And I went there and would sneak in, to the life drawing classes. So I kept up with my drawings. And then I got accepted by the grace of God. My senior year, which would have been my senior, my father came and got me. I got into this art school, a high school for art in North Carolina. Even though I missed 2 years of school, they let me come in this school when it was paid for by the government and by donations from wealthy people. It's called North Carolina High School for the Arts. It was on a college campus. And this is where I learned photography. I got there based on my drawings, and that's where I learned photography. And the minute I took my first roll of film, I was in love, and I knew that this was it. And I never really finished a drawing after that. And a lot of it was influenced by the Renaissance. Even my first roll of film, all my high school friends in the dormitories, in Renaissance poses like Michelangelo's Dying Slave, and everyone's naked, but we're all like 15, 16, 17 years old, but so was I. So it was just normal. It wasn't erotic or anything like that. And I've always seen the human body as something beautiful and not just an erotic thing. Coming out of that school with photography, with my little portfolio of photos of my friends, I came back to New York. Now I'm 17 years old, and I'm just knocking on every door. And I went to the first place I was in love with Andy Warhol, and he was one of my favorite artists, him and George O'Keeffe. I went to, I would see Andy in nightclubs. The 2 years I lived in New York before, I would see Andy out, but I never would talk to him because I had nothing. I was a kid, and I'd see him at Studio 54. I'd see him in the nightclubs. But now I had some photos. So I went to Interview Magazine. I saw Andy at a concert, and I went up to him. I said, "I'm a photographer." And he said, "Oh, come by the office. Come by the factory." I was so casual, and anyone could just go talk to him. He was so accessible and so kind. So I went the next day. I was so excited. And I showed them a portfolio of all my naked friends from high school. And he's like, "Oh, these are great. These are great." And I was like, "Oh, he said they're great." Later, much later, I realized Andy would say everything was great. Like, "Oh, you made this tea? This is great. This is so great. How did you do that?" Like, but he wasn't jaded. He actually, was so excited about things, and so excited about life. So it took me a little while to get into Interview Magazine. It was the most important popular culture magazine in the world, Interview. But prior to that, while I was waiting for them, because the art director, Andy said, "Great," but the art director said, "Come back in 6 months." And in that 6 months, I put together a gallery show at my friend's loft. We just like two friends, like, let's put on a show. I was using her dark room, and she was like a rich girl. Her parents were rich, and she had this loft, and this beautiful loft. And she had a dark room, and she worked in fashion. And I was renting her dark room, and we became friends. And I said, "Let's do a show." We came home one night from the nightclub, and I said, "No, I've been working on these photos in your dark room." And her boyfriend was like, "Yeah, I'll do the lighting, and we'll get flowers," And we did our first show in '84, and March 29th, 1984. And it was called Good News for Modern Man, which was a Bible I had when I was young. So I always was like a really spiritual kid. It was never pushed on me, but I was very like drawn to God. And also at this time, something, this incredible East Village, which I have to say, like Mexico City, the certain parts and certain areas of Mexico City remind me so much of the East Village in the 1980s. There's so many artists living there, and it's been really amazing being in these neighborhoods and like getting this real feeling of New York City back in the 80s. There's a vibrancy and artistic thing is happening here. So this is a really special time here, I think. It really feels like, it reminds me so much of that time in the 1980s when so many artists, Keith Haring, Jean-Michel Basquiat, and you just see them, like on the street, you'd see them at the clubs, you talk to them and hang out. It was such a small group of artists, and they all knew each other. I was younger than them, but so they were like the older guys, but I was still at the same parties, and Keith would let me into this nightclub called the Mud Club. It was cool, it was really an amazing time to be there, and we all knew it. It was utopia. It was like, oh my gosh. I lived in a horrible little dingy apartment, but we loved it, It was no electricity, really crazy, like a squat. I don't know if they have that word, squat. Like we just stayed there like illegally. And then, this utopia, this dark cloud came over this city, and that was AIDS, but it didn't have a name. It was just this strange thing that people started getting sick. And at first it was like older gay men and Haitians and heroin users, but then it was like the younger people, like my friends, started getting sick, who were 20 years old, 21, 24, 33, 35, like everybody started getting sick and dying very fast, like in a matter of months, like just going from super healthy to dead. Like it was like a nightmare. So it was this utopia. It's kind of like the tale of two cities. It was the best of times and the worst of times. I felt like I was in a war, I felt like my father had been in World War II or the Korean War, and every generation sort of has a war. And I felt like, okay, this is my war. And I thought that for sure I was gonna die, because my first boyfriend I lived with, I was 19 when I met him. He was 21, and he died at 24, and I was 21. We'd been together 3 years, and I was very drawn at this moment. That's where God really, even came stronger into my life, because I kept asking myself, where does the spirit go? Like, where does the energy of a 24-year-old healthy young man, like, where does, it doesn't just, this, there's got to be more to life than the material plane. And then all these sort of premonitions, miracles, synchronicities were happening in my life, because I was open to it, because I was humble, I was praying, and so things were happening that confirmed that this was true, that there was more to this life than the material plane. I really believe this. And yes, I mean, it was the best of times and the worst of times, And I didn't think I had long to be here. I thought I was only going to be here for a short time. So I didn't want to leave a legacy. It wasn't about a name or leaving a legacy. I wanted to just leave the world with some beauty. And I did the Angel series, and that was it. It was really, my motives were never fame or money or any of that. It was just, I want to give the world some beauty. And I always say to artists, what's your advice when the artists ask me, young people, like interns at my studio or at lectures, something like this, ask me, what advice do you have for young artists? And I always say, as for myself, I answered that question by ask yourself, what can you give? What does the world need? Like, what do you want to see that you can also share with the world to give the world a gift? Like, it's not like, what am I going to get from the art world? What am I going to give the world? Not just the art world. Art world's this, the world, like, what can I give the world? What talent do I have? What am I doing can somehow touch somebody else, And that's what I really wanted to do. It was never about material possessions. I mean, I was so happy living in that little apartment, like sleeping on the floor of the mattress, like no electricity. I was really happy there, So, as we should know, happiness, material things don't make you happy. Like Jay-Z says, more money, more problems. If you let it. Otherwise money can be freedom. And I realized that the only thing money can buy me is freedom to do what I want and freedom not to worry about money. So that's what money gives you, is the freedom to not have to worry about money. Because, when I was really poor, I was worried about, how am I going to get the light bill paid? How am I going to pay for my photo bills? And then once I started making a little money, I was like, oh, now I'm free. I can create, I can put my money into my art. And I always invested in my own pictures. I had $2,000 in the bank. I took all that money and I had this artist make the angel wings. And this is analog. So I didn't want, ties around the shoulders. I wanted the wings to really look like they had muscles and that the person could fly with them. And since this is what my answer was to all my friends dying of AIDS was, the angel was the representation of spirit or the representation of soul. And this is what I didn't invent this. This is what the artists of history they came up with, right? And I couldn't think of anything better of a representation of the soul than a winged figure to fly like a bird. To me, that was freedom. They had it right. The artists of antiquity had it correct about the angel representing our souls. So I did this series. I took every penny I had out of the bank and had these wings made, and had 4 pair made for the $2,000. And I still invest in my own work. you know, to this day. And it's just brought me so much joy. What I could never have imagined the life, you know, that came full circle.
Well, this is about what we talked about when he was at the gallery, and I was really shocked when I spoke with David, because this is the David he is, and that is so magical for me, and I really admire him for his spirituality. And that is the second question. Your approach to spirituality, sensitivity, and capturing the intangible essence in your photography is truly remarkable. Remember that is the title of this conference. And the way you depict the spiritual realm in an analogical form, this is very important. And I would like you to explain that to us, dear David. It is a beautiful explanation. Can you share insights into how you conceive and bring to life these ethereal images, and what drives your exploration of the spiritual through your art?
It's the most important thing to me. You know, it's the most important thing in my life. I feel that it's the answer to so many of my needs. Is through God. It's through prayer, meditation, quietness, finding God in nature. You don't only find God in a church. My mother found God in the forest. My father found God in the church, but they never forced it on me. And I was just drawn to it because I really believe, you know, going through what I did, with all my friends dying so quickly, I had to find an answer, and the answer came. And I had so many confirmations that was truth for me, right? And then I felt it's like a burning, like, I have to get it out. Even when I did the most recent work, this is the Deluge, but when I did Stations Across, which I'm showing here for the first time in the museum, you know, it was such a necessary desire. And I thought about this for 2 years, and I prayed about it. And if I don't have time to tell you right now, but honestly, like, so many synchronistic things happened. Prayers were answered in such an incredible way. There was no question in my mind, because I didn't know if I should do it or not. You know, because I didn't really understand it all 100%. And I was like, maybe it's too sacred and I shouldn't do it. And I couldn't find the right person to play Christ. I wanted someone from Nazareth. I wanted someone who looked like Jesus. From that part of the world, forgiving eyes and a poetic face. And on a Tuesday night, I was in Maui, and I lose track of time and days when I'm out there. And I got on my knees and I said, God, I can't find Jesus. Maybe this isn't supposed to happen. Maybe I'm not supposed to do these images. Just give me a sign, you know? And I went to sleep and I woke up at really early, like more than normal. I woke up and in my head was this like, this artist had phoned a few weeks earlier about doing his album cover. He was an Italian rapper. I never heard of him. And I didn't even think about it. It wasn't in my brain. I was like, you know, we get calls for things, and anyway, I just didn't think about it. But that morning I woke up and I was like, the Italian rapper, I didn't even know his name. And I went up to the main house where there's Wi-Fi, and I had him on a Zoom call at 8 a.m. and I saw the face that I was looking for. And later he wanted me to do his album cover, The Divine Comedy, Heaven, Hell, and Paradise, right? Purgatory, heaven, purgatory, and paradise. And I said, will you do an art project with me? He said, yes, I will. And then I said, well, I'll talk to you in 2 days. And then I couldn't believe it. I was so excited. I found my person to play Jesus. And then later that day, I was doing a hike, and In my little town in Maui, it's a little village in the jungle. There's a cross on this hill, and you hike up to it. It's a really good hike. And at the very top, there's a cross overlooking the city. They built a village. It's really tiny in 1940. And I was up there, and I saw all the people going into the church. You can see the whole town and the ocean, you know? And I'm like, why are you going to the church? And I went down to see, and that day that I found Tedwa, who played Jesus, was Ash Wednesday. I had no idea. I lost track of time. Ash Wednesday is when you start using the Stations of the Cross. You know, so for me, this was like incredible. I was like, wow, this is an answer, you know? So I do a lot of prayer. Sometimes inspiration comes from riding your bike. You'll be washing, you know, someone said the other day, like doing the dishes. You'll be just doing something very banal or just normal, and inspiration will come. Other times I can sort of conjure the inspiration by really praying and asking, what should I be doing, you know? And it's not about quantity, you know, it's about, I do much less pictures, but I spend more time on them because there's so many images being made. And today everyone's swiping, you know, we see thousands of images every day. And what I can tell you is that it's so important to make time alone, away from your social media, away from your friends, your family. When you have questions about life as an artist, questions about life, period, you know, we have the answers inside of us. If we ask 10 friends, what's the answer? They're going to give us 10 different answers. You know, our parents will tell us one thing, our friends will tell us another thing, our boyfriend or girlfriend will tell us another answer. But if we sit still in the silence, then we can hear that small voice, because it's quiet. The voice is quiet. It's not a loud voice, and it's not an audible voice. You'll see little signs, you'll get messages, you'll hear the still small voice that is inside all of us, and that's your answer. And I go to nature, I go to trees, I go to water, I go where there's, you know, just getting away from the noise. And I would ask the big questions in life, you know, the big questions. Not only what picture should I make, but life questions, you know, which direction do I go? Because as artists, we don't have a roadmap, you know, we don't have a GPS to tell us, like, if you want to be a lawyer, you do well in school, and then you go to a certain university, you take law classes, you decide what kind of law you want to specialize in, and then you go to a law firm and you're an intern, you do an internship, and then hopefully you get hired as a lawyer or a doctor. You know, there's a road for that. But for an artist, there's no plan. You know, some people go to art school. I didn't finish high school. And there's some of my friends who are artists, they went to college and got art degrees and they're doing great art. You know, everybody has a different path as an artist. I could have never planned that, you know, once I had shown in that gallery in the East Village, people weren't buying the pictures. You know, it was the 80s. Nobody was buying. My pictures were $300. And I sold like 2. I couldn't really live off of that. You know, people weren't buying that much photography, period, in the 1980s in America. But they definitely weren't buying my work. And when I went back to Andy to Interview Magazine 6 months later, I had that gallery show. And then the art director said, okay, oh, yeah, these are cool. We're going to give you an assignment. And so I got my first job at Interview. And then I started working more and more in magazines and popular culture. And the further I did that, the more I worked in popular culture and magazines, the further I got away from galleries. But at that time, you couldn't do both. You couldn't have a name doing album covers or pop stars or celebrities and showing galleries. It was like 2 separate worlds. And if you're a fine artist, you could only do fine art. If you were in the world of commercial photography or magazines, celebrities, you you couldn't cross over. So for 20, I said, okay, well, at least I'm working, and I just made the most of it, and it just exploded. When I started doing color, everybody was shooting black and white. It was grunge was happening, and Nirvana. Everyone's kind of like everything was black and white. Lots of black and white photography. In magazines, Bruce Weber, Herb Ritz, Alan Van Unworth, everyone's doing black and white. I came up with these shocking colors and strange, scenarios that I had developed in the darkroom, and all that time alone in the darkroom. The one thing I love about photography is, well, the way I shoot is like very theatrical. And there's many ways of taking photography. I have friends who are street photographers, and they're incredible, like really great. I could never do that. I tried it. I was really bad at it. Reportage. And, for me, it's like setting up these tableaus, setting up these theatrical tableaus, casting, as much like putting on a play. And I really love this collaboration with other artists, set builders and designers, and the costume people and casting. I really love working with people as a group. It feels like family. It's a great feeling. And then afterwards, there was the quiet part, which was like reminding me of drawing, which was going in the darkroom. And that was my meditation part. So this is what I loved about photography, and having the working together with people, and also the quiet time to be alone with the work,
Well, here we are seeing that, well, what caught my attention is that all the work that David makes, the photography he creates, is analogical, which is quite interesting because everything, as he said, it's collaborative, and he has these beautiful streets, or I don't know, clouds painted by a painter. And then the models are created by special people who do that. And it is so interesting. Why don't you tell us about the refinery, for example, which is so beautiful, this model you made?
Which one?
The refinery.
Oh, the refinery series.
It's you see there, please.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about, even 30 years ago, there was a group show in New York City with Keith Haring and Jean-Michel Basquiat, and it was at the Tony Schifrazi Gallery, who became my gallerist. And this show was about saving the rainforest in Brazil. And that's when I first became aware of, the climate and what we were doing to it. And here we are 30 years later, and we're still dealing with these changes, which I've seen myself. I think we all know that things are changing, that we're in a different time, not only with the climate, but with so many other things. And when I did these refineries, it was really a statement about one of the greatest changes of human evolution was the discovery of fossil fuels and the use of fossil fuels to, suddenly our population went, with the discovery of the Industrial Revolution, in fossil fuels, our population went like that. And it allows us all to be here today. It allows for us to travel. It allows for so many good things. But at the same time, it has the effects that it has had. It's been the biggest change in the world since Christ. This is the biggest change. The biggest thing to happen to the world since Christ has been, I think personally, the Industrial Revolution, and the biggest change to living. So I did these sets out of everything was found, or stuff that was disposable, packaging. We used bottles and usually hair rollers at the bottom there. Everything was garbage. Everything was made out of tin cans or plastic disposables. If you look closely, you see water bottles there, and just kind of like the things we throw away. There was so much packaging, and I'm not pointing my finger at saying they. It's we. You know, we're all part of this world. We're here today with lighting and air conditioning and electricity. So we're all in it, you know, and you know, hopefully through some miracles we can find a way out, you know, or who knows, you know. But this was something I wanted to really explore, sort of just to commemorate, you know.
You took this refinery was taken to the desert also, right?
In the desert, yes.
And then
And the jungle.
you took it to Maui.
Yes.
So
this was in the studio. This one here, we built that in the studio. And this was in the jungle. So it started with gas stations. And one day I was just sitting in Maui and I just saw a little temple glowing. Like I in my imagination, I saw a little temple and I was like, I thought about what am I looking at in my head? And it was like a little gas station in the forest. And then I realized that all the forest, the jungle is the fossil fuel of today. You know, so the jungle, the ancient jungle turns into the fossil fuel that we pump up from the earth to use. So I was there in a jungle and did these gas stations, sort of like after we're all gone, you know, there's going to be what we leave behind, you know, what some future generation will see of the way we lived. And, you know, I'm trying not to hear, again, it's not, you know, derogatory commentary on humanity, like this photo here. This is sort of, you know, the most polluting of all forms of transportation is the cruise ship. And it feels like we're on a cruise ship and everyone's partying, and you know, they talk about like when Rome burned, and you know, everyone's drinking as much as you can, all you can eat. But instead of the waters melting, they froze back up, you know, and they froze the ship in place, and yet the party is still going on. So it's just, you know, these are just comments on our way of living in this time.
Well, I would like to finally, before asking you if you have any question, could you please tell us about Hieronymus Bosch,
Hieronymus Bosch?
please?
Yeah, Hieronymus Bosch was, and everyone knows, the Garden of Good and Evil. You know, when you see this at the Prado in Madrid, it's really spectacular, you know. Painting, the imagination is incredible that went into this. And, you know, it inspired me to do some works. So I've taken elements of that for inspiration. There's Kim Kardashian in front of one of the elements of Hieronymus Bosch. It's sort of like she's holding the pomegranate. You know, again, this is, you know, this woman has such an impact on our culture in the way that the shape of the body is. Even she really is responsible. Like, she's had this incredible impact and influence on the way women, like some women, want to look, and it's changed the way we view beauty or the way we think things are attractive. It's had an incredible impact, you know. And the question is this garden, you know, is this the garden of good or is this the garden of evil? That's the question.
Now, is someone there who wants to make a question to David, please?
Yeah. Right, there's someone right
Who
there.
is in
green
charge
shirt.
of the micro?
I have it written down.
Sorry?
I have it written down, so I'm gonna read it. Okay.
Okay.
How does David LaChapelle imagines the future of the world and of the images?
You know, I I look around the world and I think we're in this new chapter, and I think that it's a dimming. We're living in a dimming world. It's getting darker, and why I say that is I don't find myself being a pessimist. I just look at reality. I look at things, but I see, you know, art has always been a mirror to the time in which it was created, and when we study an ancient culture, we study their art, we study their architecture. We don't. It's not the politicians. We don't know their names, but we know the carvings on this temple. We know the carvings on this pyramid. We know the hieroglyphics on this on this structure, you know, and we know the paintings. So we understand what that society valued through their art. And if we look around our world today and we look at popular culture, because really art is not in the museum. Like what people are looking at, what really is having an impact on society isn't in the museums. It's on the Netflix. It's on the TV. You know, it's on social media. It's in the music that young people are listening to, and everyone. You know, this is what really is having the impact. If we look at that, you know, we see so many options on, you know, we have a streaming service, right? You have it here on Netflix. Okay, there was four separate films, documentary, 4 separate offerings on Ted Bundy, a serial killer. Four separate things. A drama with Zac Efron, the handsome actor playing the serial killer. Art, you know, and now there's Jeffrey Dahmer, you know, another serial killer, which is the most watched in the history of Netflix. And this is what people are looking at, you know. We want to think that they're in museums getting inspiration, but really it's from the televisions. That's what has people's attention. It's from the social media, right? So if we look at that as a mirror to what we're into, why are we obsessed with torture and blood and suffering and death? We can't get enough of it. What is this coming from? The selfie. You know, there's a line in the Bible, you know, when men become lovers of self, in Timothy it says, you know, you're near the end. And that's the one line. You know, there's always been wars and rumors of wars. There's always been those things. There's always been lawlessness. But when men become lovers of self, that I cannot say that about my father's generation, about my grandfather's generation. But I can say that about the time I'm living in now. And so when I look around the world and I see the art being created, the popular art, the popular culture. So pop art or popular culture comes from the Latin vox populi, voice of the people. So this is created by us. Is yours working? So I look around and see the art being made and the films being offered, and I see a darkness, you know, a real darkness. I see, you know, at the same time, there's not one documentary on Netflix, like I say, about Stevie Wonder, one of the greatest musicians. He's still alive, and he's, you know, incredibly, probably one of the greatest artists of any medium, you know, living on our planet. And there's not anything about him, but there's all these on serial killers. And every show you watch, or the reality shows, and the highlight is when the family's fighting and they're drinking. It's all about materialism and just wanting more and more, and, you know, just the status and the Gucci and the bags and all these things. It's like, where's this going? You know, where is this going? So in my head, I'm feeling that if art is a reflection of our culture, then we're in a dark place. That can be my only answer. You know, when I see what's being consumed and created and the demand for it. And it wouldn't be created if there wasn't a demand. And why are we so, what is it saying about us? You know, as an artist, we can create beauty and light, or we can create darkness and confusion. We can create whatever we want. I think it's easier to make something that's confusing and dark. I think it's more difficult to create something someone can understand, comprehend, that can touch them. And for me, the greatest thing in art is touching a person through their artwork, you know, like touching their soul through a work of art. To me, that's the beautiful moment in art, you know. Did I get anywhere near your question?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Thank you. Can I have another quick question?
Sorry?
Another quick question.
Mhm.
What is God for David LaChapelle?
God, well, reading the Bible, you know, I never read the Bible until I would read quotes from the Bible a lot of growing up. I would read prayers and things like that. When I started reading the Bible was just a few years ago. And when I saw the words written in this ancient manuscript, God is love. I thought, when I saw it there in writing for myself, it was different than someone telling me. It was different than a priest or a minister or a preacher. Reading it myself, God is love. It changed everything for me. You know, I just thought like, that is what God is. God is love, you know, and that's why we call the show Amor. You know, where there is love, there is God. And, you know, growing up, I remember, you know, during the AIDS crisis, and it's still happening now, but there's people saying, oh, they deserve it. You know, they deserve it. They're gay, and, you know, this is their punishment. Well, that couldn't be further from the truth. And I knew they were liars. I knew they were liars. I knew that they didn't know the truth. So for me, God is love.
Hi. Hello. Hi, David.
Hi.
Here.
Hi, hey.
Hi, David. Well, so there's this subject. By doing the press tour on your exhibit, I realized there is a subject which is barely talked about in your work, and that really caught my eye, and it was intimacy. By looking at your pictures, even though they might be shot at very public places, there is a certain sense of intimacy I could get from them. The one I could feel this the most was one of a sort of a dollhouse, where there is like a lot of people, but pretty much everybody is on their own, locked in a room, pretty much in their own business. And I would like to know if you have ever reflected upon this subject on the rest of your work. Even when I see that there is like a lot of people in your compositions, they pretty much seem to be on their own, like different loneliness just colliding in a sort of public arena. Thank you.
Thank you. So you were talking about self-portrait as house?
Yeah, that house.
This image?
Yeah, that image.
Yeah, this was a self-portrait. I was always asked to do a self-portrait. And so the different rooms of the house represent the different like parts of my brain or at that time when I created it. And we actually built this set. And so the bottom, this room over here is anger. So over here, like body image, or you know how, but thinking about how you look, and you know, up there's this girl praying on her knees, and that's the spiritual moment. The clutter up in the attic, which are this random thoughts you can't get out of my head, and then there's you know the youth and the aging of the swan, our lifetime, our cycle, and thinking about that. And then there's these sort of like, you know, shameful things or things that you want to like put aside or hide from everybody. So every room in the center is unconditional love. And that's the woman who's holding a baby that's not hers, but she's loving it unconditionally like a mother. So, you know, the rooms of the house would be different today for myself, but at the time I made it, there's pretty accurate description of like I was trying to suppress the anger issues of having it with myself or whatever, but it was pretty much a self-portrait, you know. But I think that people see in art what they will see, you know, like someone was looking at the deluge at the gallery, at this my gallery dealer, Tony Shafrazi, he got very excited. Oh, this billionaire collector's coming, you know, and the deluge was up on the wall. And he looked at the deluge and all he saw were people taking as much as they could. And you know, it was not at all what I had intended, but this was his perspective. When he saw this picture from the Sistine Chapel, this is the flood of Noah, when I made the flood of the future. What he saw in my image was people taking as much, they were hoarding. He saw people hoarding. We just go back to the deluge. He saw everybody trying, but for me, I saw people helping each other. I saw them extending arms and reaching out to one another and helping them. And this, he saw something totally different. So we'll see art from our own point of view. And you know, that's something I can't dictate. I try to be very clear. I don't want there to be confusion. And when people see my work, there's enough confusion in the world. So when I make something, I want it to be clear, but people will interpret as they see it and from their perspective.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the question.
Hi. So one of your recent works shows a depiction of a giant earthquake, or in some other works you've depicted artists from other recognizable figures like Damien Hirst or Jeff Koons. So I would like to know, like, what your relationship to what the future of the art industry or the art business is like from your experience, and yeah, just understand a little bit more what's behind like this whole composition. Is it analog as well? Is this like a collage?
This was a model I built. I built this model. It took a year. Everything was to scale. I hired, at the time I made it, all the miniature model makers, the ones that worked on the film Titanic and things like that, they're out of work because of CGI. So I had these incredible artists to work with that worked in small miniature. And the closest museum to my house is the LACMA and the Broad building. And for me, it was like a billionaire's collection of like a who's who of art. You know, it was the Broad collection had like kind of a shopping list of like all the really expensive art that you can get. And, you know, it's built, strangely enough, it's built on a tar pit. Do you know what the tar pit is? It's like when you drive by, you smell the fumes, and it's like actually the second largest place where they found dinosaur bones in the world. They found more dinosaur bones there. Only one other place they found more. So it's built on top of this ancient tar pit and the La Brea tar pits. It's this really strange place to put a museum because every year they have to let the gas out or the building might explode. And I was just, you know, the commodity, like when art is just looked at as another status symbol, like, oh, you know, when people get to a certain amount of money, you know, their plane can only be so big, their boat can only be so big, their yacht, their house, their diamonds. Then how they separate themselves from the other billionaires is by the art they collect, you know, and they access to those artists because the galleries, you know, the art world depends on scarcity. So the harder it is to get to that art, the more they want it. It's like, you know what a Birkin bag is? It's like they don't let people buy it unless you're like spending a lot of money at that store that sells it. Like you can't get some people crazy. like they want that bag because it shows that they have a lot of money. And that's just, I mean, really, it's a bag, you know what I mean? It's like there are other bags that look just as pretty, but other people with money will know that you have a lot of money because you have that bag. You have a lot of money because you have this art. And I think I'm not questioning the artist's intentions. I'm questioning the collectors, the sort of this, you know, art as status. Art is a status symbol. Art is like, you know, when the flood comes, you know, I did an antiquities museum where the flood comes to the flood. Have you seen that photo of the flooded museum or the flooded statue? I don't know if we have a slide of it, but oh yeah, this one. So that was a set we built. I started with this one, and after I did this, this was a question about, you know, what was once priceless. Then when the flood comes, unless you can use that as a raft, it's valueless unless you can float on it. You know, the only value is the beauty it gives the person, the audience that has seen it. You know, and you don't have to own that art to carry that with you. You don't have to, you know, like music, right? We can listen to a song and have that song in our head, and it'll give us joy, and we own it. And if we have a painting we love or a piece of art, we don't have to necessarily own it to get all the joy that artist wanted us to get, or get all that insight, or whatever that artist intended us to feel. We connect through that artwork, you know? And we don't have to have it in our yard or in our apartment or in our house to get value from that, you know? So I don't, and this is something I contemplated a lot. And so after doing this Museum of Antiquities as flooded, which were sets that were built, and like the doorway we made very low, so I only had to use that much water. It's only that deep, but we gives the illusion that it's very deep. The way we built the set, built it low, and but yeah, that was shot in the studio. And then I thought I wanted to do a modern museum, but I didn't know how to do that unless I did it in miniature, you know. So we did it in a very small scale, and it was really just about this. Quest for materialistic, quest for accumulating things, status, like the aristocracy series where these airplanes, these private jets are all flying lost. You know, they're private jets. They're not crashing. They're not commercial flights. They're private planes kind of lost in this sort of never-ending quest for material possessions, for bigger planes, bigger houses, bigger cars, more Gucci, more, you know, more of these things. And believe me, it's strange in my life because it's a paradox, because I've also worked in the fashion world and stuff and wanted to make statements with that. Oh, is it dead? Is it dying? If I'm talking too much, just tell me shut up. Because the microphones are like cutting off. So I was always questioning these things. I was always questioning, like, it always felt weird to me that I was working for fashion magazines, which promise was your happiness will come with the next purchase. And we know that not to be true. You know, happiness doesn't come from material things, but we can get joy from art. We don't have to own it to get that joy. We don't have to own it. You know, we can just have it and carry it in our mind's eye, right?
That's great. 10th comment.
Thank you. Until they want to leave, I'm here. I mean, until everybody's gone, I'll be the last one here. Me and you.
Right here.
Sure.
Your work is remarkable for the incredible amount of manual labor and work involved in creating these images. Of course, today we are surrounded by the lazy creatives because we've got Photoshop and artificial. So my question is, what are your thoughts on the automated nature of creativity and the laziness that Photoshop and provides creatives today? And how do you engage those tools, if you do at all, today?
Yeah, thank you for the question. My brain is analog because I grew up with analog, and all my first 15 to 20 years of taking photographs, it was all analog. But early on, both in video and in film, I switched to digital because as one of the first, and I'd learned how to make the digital prints. Like today, I cannot tell which prints really large were digital and which ones were analog. The digital, I could use less lights. They gave me more depth of field. So there was all this really good stuff with that. They were better for the environment, less chemicals involved, all sorts of things. But the Photoshop, it was something I also started with very early, before there was this name Photoshop. And I explored it and I use it as a tool, but I've always kind of retouched, even when I painted on the negatives, as you saw in some of the earlier images, I've always kind of played with like the photographing the unphotographable. I would talk about like making things like more colorful, working in the dark room with shading and lighting. So I just don't want to sit in front of a computer very long. So I like things to happen in a theatrical manner. It's like opening night of a theater. Like everyone gets together and we do all the showing, have the casting and the lighting and everything's there. Then we do the photo shoot and it's like opening night. It's like a climax. And you get this rush of adrenaline when you're shooting and then it's done, And if there's problem with the photo and I need to replace something or something, I can use that as a tool. But I never start out thinking, oh, this is going to be like shot on a green screen. I think that I couldn't be inspired working in front of a green screen. I don't think it's inspiring for the people, the subject either. I think it's cold and a little bit soulless. Then it's all put together post. I like the theatrical. I like the handmade. I like the little mistakes. They talk about artificial intelligence. I believe that there's artificial intelligence. I don't really believe there's artificial creativity. I don't really believe there's artificial creation. Because so many of these, like the process of working, you're finding these beautiful accidents. Those series Stations of the Cross, I imagined all of that to be like the sets behind the Christ were going to be, I was going to paint everything desert brown. But then when I started putting the photos together, I reuse a lot of sets in my studio. I recycle and reuse it. And I was putting all these walls together. Me and my two friends, like we were putting all these like different sets together to create this, like that archway was from one shoot and that brick wall was from another. We repainted it. That shoot, like that thing he's on was in that shoot with Naomi Campbell earlier. Like, so I was recycling the sets, right? And I was going to paint everything brown. And then I looked at these crazy colors I would have never imagined. Like if I typed that into a computer, I would have gotten what I wanted. But having seen it, I'm like, oh my, this is better. Like these colors are so weird. Like I would never think to put them together like that. And I'd never seen a Station of the Cross that was colorful. I didn't want there to be blood and all that, that's been done a lot. I wanted the real authenticity of it to come from his expression. And he fasted before the shoot. He took it so seriously and he was in the moment and he was actually crying real tears. And it was really quite profound, the shoot. And that experience you can't do on a green screen, And music also helps set that feeling. I'll play the right music and it gives everybody the sort of vibe, that you want.
And that image, The Rape of Africa with Naomi Campbell, how many different photo layers are in that image? Because there's a lot going on there.
That was actually there. All that was there. The chicken.
That's one shot.
Behind her, you see the hole in the wall? That's a little model built of the diamond mines in Africa. They talk a lot about the rape of Europa, which never actually happened. But Africa has the diamond mines and the gold mines, which we can see from outer space. I read this article in National Geographic, which inspired that picture. And it was about the high price of gold, not only in the environment, but in human lives, and the slavery that goes on in these gold mines. These people are working and dying in these slave, these companies that treat them like slaves. They don't get paid a human wage. I mean, the suffering is crazy. And I saw in the National Gallery in London, Venus and Mars by Botticelli, and I thought, oh, this Botticelli. I always loved Michelangelo. Botticelli is very placid, the face is very relaxed. But I thought Mars, the god of war and greed, and Venus, goddess of beauty, and Botticelli at that time, he used a famous beauty of his day. Her name was Simonetta Vespucci. She was a famous beauty who died young, kind of like a Marilyn Monroe. She died young, beautiful. She lived in Florence, I believe, and she's an aristocrat. And I thought, well, who's a famous figure of our day? And I thought Naomi would be perfect. And this came from this thinking, like, everybody's saying, invest in gold, buy gold, because you can't trust money and you can't do this. And gold is a really good investment. So when we had the recession in 2006, the gold price went sky high, and these mines got even bigger and bigger. In this endless sense of security, we're chasing security by having gold. We're actually killing our planet. We're ensuring our own insecurity, because we're making it insecure to be on the planet. We're destroying the earth. Mother Africa is the cradle of civilization, and they're poisoning the rivers. The mercury they use to separate, another Greek god, Mercury, they use to separate the gold from the mud and the clay, is poisoning all the rivers around these immense diamond and gold mines. So the high price of gold, this is what this is about, the rape of Africa. And taking a painting from history, taking Greek mythology and bringing in a relevancy. I saw it was so, we've come so far with technology, but have we evolved, morally or spiritually? Have we've evolved with technology? And but that was a question. Have we evolved spiritually, morally? Thank you. That's Want to do one more?
Here, I have another question. Do you have time here?
One more question. As long as it's not about Britney Spears. Sorry, because some people ask about that. And I'm like, I know you and I know you guys won't. What's the question?
So my question is,
Hi.
do you ever find yourself having ideas and taking them to reality and then realizing they're not exactly the way you imagined? Like, how would you describe your creative process to take your ideas into the way you imagine them first?
Well, I start with a drawing. I start, like, it starts with the idea in my head, and then I draw it. I do a little thumbnail sketch, and then I start creating it and working with a team to build it. But it always comes out different than I imagined. And that's the thing, that these accidents that happen that you can't plan. I leave room for things to go wrong that are actually better than my idea. Or I also keep a very open set where anyone can contribute. Maybe it would look better if she was laying down, or if this was over here, or and so I keep a free set where people are free to, like, help me figure things out, and that, I think, has been amazing, when you collaborate with people. So it really never starts out like I imagine. It always evolves and comes out a lot of times better than I thought, better than I thought it would, which is such a joy, and that's when I feel like I get out of the way and I let the sort of the synchronicities, let God kind of work through it, and it just manifests, and something better than I imagined comes out. So thank you for your question. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. I really, it's been such a nice night, and I appreciate all your thoughtful questions and, just being here. And I love your city, and thank you. And your country.
Thank you, David, for everything. Thank you for the talk.
Patricia, thank you.
And-
Thank you so much.
Also, we'd like to thank you, Patricia. In the rush of everything, we forgot to introduce you. I'm so very sorry. It's a pleasure to have you here with all the experience that you have representing lots of artists. So we're really happy to have you here. And David, it was a pleasure. I'm pretty sure that all our community was delighted with everything that you say, and you connected with us a lot. So thank you very much. Centro appreciates it a lot. Muchísimas gracias a todos por haber venido. Quien dejó el libro para firma, se los va